premillennial, amillennial, postmillennial. These are all theological positions people fight hard over that you don't need to worry about that much this morning. No matter what it is, Jesus comes first, he comes later. We go up before he comes, we go up after he comes back. What do I care? I'm going to be with Jesus because my faith is firmly placed in him and I have nothing to worry about. But, a little reading from Revelation while our hearts are stirred by the trouble in the Middle East is kind of poignant. Revelation 7 talks to us about why we should remember. We're going to talk about the value of remembering today. After this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white with palm branches. Pay attention, in their hands. Two things. First covenant with Abram. I will make your descendants what? More numerous than the sand so that no one could count them. And I saw before the throne a multitude you can't count. Promise kept. Number 2. How does Jesus enter the holy city? To palm branches being waved, right? The first time incorrectly, with the idea of overthrowing governments and usurpation and power. Now they're being waved in praise and honor. A sign of what's already happened, not what we hope will happen. You see, you don't wave your palms at God and say, this is what we'd like you to do. You wave your palms at God and say, great is what you have already done. Woo, we just in the first verse, y'all. They cried out in a loud voice, saying, salvation belongs to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels stood around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, singing, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, who are these robed in white, and where have they come from? I said to him, sir, you are the one who knows. I just got here. Then he said to me, these are they who have come out of the great ordeal. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And for this reason they are before the throne of God and worship him day and night within his temple. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. Remember the words of Psalm? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want, which means I shall not have need of anything. What is the great fulfillment of promise here? They will hunger no more. They will thirst no more. The Lord is their shepherd. Check. He will guide them, listen, to springs of water of life. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you guide me, you comfort me, you lead me by where? Still waters. Check. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. What you are remembering, church, is something quite odd. It's something that has somehow also already happened. The writer is writing about what he is seeing. which is what? Somehow the future, which is also the present, which is also somehow the past. Because, like I tell my students when we wrestle with this is a tough one. God is outside of time. You are currently inside of time. When you're inside of time, and this is not physics, okay? This is just theological time, not physics time, okay? But quite literally, it's linear. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, right? And you only see what has already happened and what is happening. You cannot see what will happen, right? God, however, stands outside of time, and all that has happened, is happening, and will happen appears before him much like a picture, all at once. And somewhere on that picture is the past, and somewhere on that picture is the present, and somewhere on that picture is the future. But he's outside of time observing it. And then we say, when we talk about Jesus, that at the fullness of time, God stepped in. So theologically, there's some big movement there. And then what we say is that somehow, when you die, the promise is that you go to be with God in that reality, in that outside of time, forever, time is no more reality. None of that helps my brain. Anybody? That's hard. I don't have any idea how all of that works. But I want you to see the writer here speaking about what he sees as promise upon promise from the Old Testament is being fulfilled in front of his eyes. And what this means is that you have the hope of knowing this will happen because it's already happening. You live in this reality right now. You are a part of this picture right now. The picture is taking shape with you as a color or as a scheme right now. The one that ultimately ends like this, where there is no more tears, no more pain, no more hunger, no more thirst, where the Lord is our shepherd, where we just want to sit around the throne and worship all day. Now, I'm going to be honest. I hope there's a little more to heaven than that. Because worshiping God sounds awesome, but it also sounds like something I'd be like, I mean, is there anything else to this for the next 10,000 years? Do I get to visit with some folks? Like, do we get to hang out? Yes, there is, by the way. This is not the all the time, everyday thing that's going on in heaven. But it is a thing that's going on. And so because this has already happened, when we read this text, we are remembering. We are not projecting or forecasting, we're remembering. And here's some things we know about remembering well. We've gathered today to remember well those who are already participating in the reality I just read to you, that I believe that my ancestors and my people that went before me, my mentors and helpers and people that have gone on to be with Jesus are there. Right? And we call that church, I'm going to step off camera for a second, the great cloud of witnesses. And in our church, this is what they sound like. Each bell hung to represent someone who is already around the throne worshiping God. Someone who is already in the presence of God himself doing the things we just read. Someone who isn't experiencing scorching heat. That would been nice this summer. Someone who isn't experiencing pain or tears. Someone who isn't hungry or thirsty but has every need met by the shepherd. This is something we believe and we remember them for these reasons. Remembering well does a few things. Number one, it reminds you how you got here. The best part of remembering those who have gone before is it reminds you how you got here. You did not arrive in this moment of your own ability and accord. Somebody helped you get here. Some of them are already with the Lord. I would not be who I am today without the unique involvement of each and every one of my grandparents, without friends that have already gone on, without mentors who have already gone on, without coaches who have already gone on. I was texting a buddy of mine this morning and I said, man, you remember Coach Swears? Who I am in and around the idea of youth and athletics has almost everything to do with Coach Swears. There are people like that in our lives. You are here, you are who you are because of their influence, a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a friend, a cousin, a neighbor. Probably all of those. And what you are doing when you remember them is saying, I got here with help. This does two things for you. A, it makes you humble. It helps you understand, I'm not quite as great as I think I am. I actually needed quite a bit of help. And when you start to remember the list and it gets long, you're like, I needed a lot of help. And thank God there was a lot of people who showed up around me and helped. Some are still here, some are already with Jesus, but this is what that exercise does for you. It humbles you. It helps you understand that God did a good thing in bringing lots of people around you to help you, whether you wanted it or not. Sometimes you rejected that help. But it humbles us. It also reminds you that there was a standard set for you. I always hated this about visiting Grandma and Grandpa Reed's house. Because at a time in my life I wasn't particularly doing well, I was going to be asked, how is it going? Getting back in school anytime soon? A standard was going to be articulated and accountability was going to be had with the lieutenant colonel. And I avoided it sometimes because I didn't want to be reminded I was not reaching all of my particular goals. But what he was saying is, in our family, there's a standard. And we're encouraging you to achieve it. You have all the gifts and graces you need to do so, and so you're out of excuses. And what do you need from us anyway to help? So remembering well humbles us. It also reminds us how we got here, what that standard that's been set for us. It also tells you this, that you have a responsibility to do the same. If somebody got you here, you are helping someone else get there. Obviously, if it's kids, that makes a ton of sense. But what if it's just a neighbor? What if it's a coworker? What if it's someone who doesn't even know you're playing that role in their life yet until 20 years from now? And they reflect on, like, if it hadn't have been for that coworker who really showed me the ropes in an industry I wanted to learn, I would have never, ever found the success I've come to find. How thankful I am for, insert name here. So it reminds us that we are those who are helping others. So remembering well reminds us how we got here. Number 2, remembering well teaches the importance of honor. That if there are those who helped, they deserve to be honored. That we don't just receive help and say, thanks, gotta go, and move on. That somehow we need to, the phrase for this now is give them their flowers. We need to give them their flowers, and then we say, while they're here, while they're still alive. Because sometimes you don't get your flowers until we're all standing around your casket or your urn or whatever, and we say, oh, Reese, he was such a good guy. If he was here right now, I'd tell him, and he's all these wonderful things I never said. Let me give him his flowers. Let me honor him now. And that's perfectly good. And it's not like we're going to stop having funerals tomorrow and do this. That's part of what a funeral is it's honoring that person and all they've meant to you, and you speak to that. But you know what I run into a lot is that when we do funerals, a lot of people say, well, I couldn't possibly. Not because I don't have lots to say, but in the moment I'm far too emotional. You know when you're not emotional? When they're still alive. And so remembering those who have gone before reminds us that honor is important. Not just honoring those who went before, but to honor those in our lives today who are still here, where we still have time to give that honor and to say, thank you. You have made a difference in my life. You have helped me get here. You have taught me something, trained something in me, shown me a characteristic. It also tells us this, that not only that honor is important, that others made it possible, but it reminds us of this. You honor people because of their great sacrifice. What it's doing when you honor someone is it's realizing and recognizing that it's not just that they kind of helped out because they felt like it and they had a little extra time on their hands, but they sacrificed. There was a period in our family's life where we lived in Blanco, Texas on a ranch, and the only work Mom and Dad could get was in the city. And they're both driving to cities an hour away commute each day, different cities. San Marcos and Austin. Pflugerville, for God's sake, right? Which we end up living in because that got tiresome. But for about 3 years, they're commuting every day to work, an hour there, an hour back. As a kid, you don't know what that means. You just know that Dad leaves early and he gets back a little bit late. For a while, it meant this: why can't he ever be there to pick me up from practice? Because he's sacrificing. That's why. He's doing something that he doesn't want to do to make sure you have things you do want or have interest in. And I had no comprehension until I got older of what level my mom sacrificed, at what level my dad sacrificed, at what level my grandparents at certain points sacrificed, at what level, you see? Honoring is about recognizing that people didn't help you out of their excess. A lot of times people supported you out of their sacrifice. And that's worth honoring. You forewent something to help me. And so we remember them to remember the sacrifice. That it was others that let us stand on their shoulders to be where we are. Have you ever had someone stand on your shoulders for real, for real? It's painful. So the metaphor sounds lovely, but the reality is painful. And when someone metaphorically lets you stand on their shoulders, when they put in that work, right? Now here's what I can tell you. That is the dream of every parent. I want my ceiling to be my children's floor. I want them to stand on my shoulders. I don't want them to come by it easy. I want them to have great work ethic and grit and all the things. But I still want for them to begin where I left off. I don't want them to go back and learn all the things I had to learn the hard way. I want my learning those things the hard way to convey and for me to teach it to them, and then they get to launch from there. Which I try to say when I'm giving instruction and correction. Like, I'm just trying to help you. This is something I messed up. Don't make the same mistake. And they're like, you don't know, Dad, but that's another thing. So remembering well reminds me how I got here. Remembering well teaches me the importance of honor. Remembering well trains my hope, listen very closely, to look forward. Remembering well trains my hope to look forward. The Bible says it this way: you do not grieve as the pagans grieve. When someone passes, you're not saying, oh no, it's all over. You actually celebrate because something has moved forward. Their life is not done. It is simply moving on to something we don't fully understand yet, but that someday we'll see. And so we don't grieve. We grieve. I mean, I want my grandparents here. I want to be spoiled right now. Right? They've all four gone on, right? And I want them here because I want to be spoiled right now. But I don't grieve as if I will never see them again, because as sure as I'm standing here with you, they are waiting in the place that just got described. And so I have a hope that looks forward. I'm sad, but I'm not despondent. I miss them, but I'm hopeful about the reunion. Remembering well trains my hope to look forward. Another thing it shows me is, you know what? Others have done it. I can do it too. It was not pleasant to walk through the process with family members who died. It wasn't pleasant. You've been there. You've done this. You've seen it. It's terrible. They physically change. They emotionally change. They spiritually change. You can see it. It all gets thin. And then, right, like you can almost tell, like, oh, they're going now. Like, it's time. There's this weird thing that happens in those realities where you can sense it. You can feel it. It's like the space between heaven and earth gets a little thinner there. I can't describe it any other way. And it's almost like you can see beyond the veil, but not quite. And I've been in that moment a bunch as a pastor. But I've been in it with family too. And it was not pleasant. It has to be hard. It has to be scary. It has to be difficult. But you know what? If Grandpa Reed can do it, by God, if Grandma Reed could do it, right? Okay. I'm not ready for it today. I don't want to get there anytime soon. But it's coming for me like it's coming for all of us. And so I'm reminded that others have gone before me. And if they could do it, I could do it. It trains my hope to look forward. Why? Because death is not the end. Here's what this means. I and you, we are not living our life for the end of our life, but for the eternity of heaven. You are not living for the end of this life. Now, we make some preparations, right? It's like moving. If you're going to move, you make preparations. Someone's got to come get the furniture. They're going to put it in the truck. It's going to go over here. It's going to do this. So we make preparations for moving day, which is simply to say, well, there needs to be a will. It needs to say where all the stuff goes. It needs to be like, okay, when I'm gone, do this, do that. I want to make sure if there's anybody that I'm particularly responsible for, a spouse, kids, grandkids, that I want to make sure things pass down a certain way, materially, that's all squared away, right? That's just like getting ready to move. But I am not living my life like that's the end moment. Right? Here's a great example of people who thought that was, like an end moment, right? There's people that take all their stuff to the grave. Like, yeah, bury me with all of it. Why? I don't know, just in case. But I don't know, so just throw it in there in case I need it. I don't know. And all I'm doing is I'm amassing all my wealth because I don't know what's going to happen next. You've seen this. You know people that live without hope. It's not hard to find. But there's a difference in there. There's a difference. I'm making preparations for my stuff to move beyond me, but that's not where my life ends. So I'm not living my life like the end of my life is the end. I'm going to live my life in light of the eternity of heaven. And that means we live different, church. Just means you live different. So remembering those who have gone before helps us to train our hope to look forward. It reminds us that we are not living our life for the end of our life, but for the eternity of heaven. And I'm doing that in three different ways. In me, in my family, and in my community. It changes how I live in each place. Now, what else? When hope looks forward, today's disappointments shrink. If I've got 30 years left, and I get terrible news today of some nature, you don't have a job, your whole savings account got stolen. There's not that much in there anyway, I didn't take it. You got bad news medically. It's cancer and it's bad. You got days. Right? If there's no hope that's trained towards the future, That is the worst possible news today. Today's disappointment is big. But if there's some other reality, then today's disappointments shrink. Well, you lost your job. Man, that stinks. But God's still in charge, and there's still a future no matter what. Even if I die broke, I'm still going to be with Jesus. So, okay. It just changes it. It makes it smaller. It doesn't magnify it. I've heard people say it this way: I wonder how people who have no hope or don't believe that there's a heaven deal with loss. And the answer is they deal with it badly. And loss gets bigger over time when you have no hope. Because it's like, they're never coming back. I'll never see him again. I can't even wake up tomorrow. Why? What's the point? They were my whole world. See, I love Natalie. She's not my whole world. She's a gift the one who created the world brought me. And she belongs to him just like I do. And her future is set just like mine is. And if I lost her, it'd be terrible. And I would probably hide for months. But I'm going to come out of that at some point and go, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. At some point. And I've never had to say that with someone very near to me, but I've had to say it with people who were pretty near to me. I've never had to do it in a tragedy, but I've seen others who have had to do it in a tragedy. And I've watched as their faith walked them right out of the darkest places. Not quickly, not overnight, but eventually. Because when we remember well, it trains our hope to look forward. And when our hope looks forward, today's disappointments eventually shrink. Finally, we remember well because it is an act of worship in and of itself. Did you know that God tells us to remember 253 times in the Bible? Remember, remember, remember. Not only that, but then he also says, he uses the other term, remembering, 25 more times. So over 250 times we're told to remember. Can you tell me how many times the Scriptures tell us that he will not remember? Hebrews 8. This is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, says the Lord, I will put my laws in their minds and write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach one another or say to each other, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will be merciful toward their sin, and I will remember it no more. 1. This is intriguing to me because God is a God of memory. Every time something significant happens, God says, build an altar there so you'll remember. Build a temple there so you'll remember. Carry the covenant with you here so you'll remember. Here's the tent of meeting so you can walk around and remember. God is a God of memory, and he remembers, which at first blush is awfully scary. Because that means he's not going to forget all the bad things I've done. He remembers, except for when he chooses not to. I will be their God, and I will be merciful, and I will remember their sins no more. This is good news. The one who says remembering is important, remembering well is important, also says the one thing that if I remember it would cause you a lot of problems, I'm just going to forget it. I will not remember your sin. Now, to make that super interesting, how does God tell us to celebrate the good news that he won't remember our sins? Remember me. The way you celebrate that God won't remember is you are to remember. And so, in just a minute, we are going to remember that. And as we do, as you come, I want you to remember that God does not remember your sin. And then I want you to remember that someone taught you that.